Hello, everybody. David Shuster here. Amidst the Trump trade wars and U.S. markets crashing, now there is this. Trump tariffs prompt slump in shipments to U.S. ports.
What we're seeing now is that cargo coming in from Asia will be down by about 35% until we get some semblance or signals that trade deals are on the way.
Gene Soroka is the Port of LA executive director.
We only have 7 ships in port today. Okay. Normally on a Wednesday, you'd see 12 to 14 vessels. The worst case scenario is less choice on store shelves and online buying. Prices spike and families are really becoming tighter with their budgets.
Even President Trump acknowledges it's already started and that cargo ships loaded with Chinese-made clothing, electronics, and household goods have stopped entering U.S. ports.
These are the biggest boats in the world, biggest cargo ships in the world, and they're coming and they're turning around in the Pacific Ocean. They're doing a big U-turn and going back because they don't want the goods because 145% tariff. But at a certain point, I hope we're going to make a deal with China. We're talking to China.
But the talks so far have produced nothing. In the meantime, the costs of foreign-made goods and components are skyrocketing, U.S. consumer demand is dropping, and many U.S. companies and businesses are already laying off workers. The margins are especially tough for small businesses. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which is usually a strong supporter of Republican lawmakers, is now asking the Trump White House to provide small business relief. Otherwise, the chamber says there will be a recession.
Stephen, is the administration considering small business tariff relief?
The relief for small businesses is going to come in the form of the largest tax cut in American history. A tax cut, by the way, that every single Democrat is planning to vote against.
So that's a no on tariff relief for small businesses in the short term?
It's a yes on tax relief for small businesses. And again, you only pay the tariff for products that are made outside the United States.
But many U.S. products have components that are made outside of the United States. Also, even if Congress passes a tax bill that allows businesses to write off all investment expenses, that change is still several months away. In the meantime, all public polling shows that American consumers have lost confidence in the Trump administration and are not buying the Trump White House plea to be patient.
So consumer sentiment obviously measures what consumers feel about the economy at a point in time. This gray line going to black here is all Americans put together, and you can see how it's rolled over like that. This is the 4th lowest reading in history since they started taking this survey.
And what about CEOs and titans of industry who largely supported Donald Trump's presidential campaign?
No ambiguity about CEOs. CEOs feel like this has just gone off a cliff. This is the lowest reading since 2010 in the wake of the financial crisis. CEOs, and I've been around a lot of CEOs in the last few days, and we talked about it a few minutes ago, they hate the tariffs, but they hate the uncertainty even more. They have no idea how to plan their business. They have no idea what's coming. You're seeing CEOs at the moment releasing their first quarter earnings reports where they normally tell you the outlook for the year, and company after company is saying, we can't tell you the outlook for the year because we don't know.
The chaos and turmoil has crashed U.S. stock markets.
Let's talk about what happened in the stock market. In Trump 2.0, the stock market is down 7%. That is the worst performance of a stock market in the first 100 days of a presidential term since Nixon's second term in 1973. It is in stark contrast to Trump's first term, when, contrary to what many people expected, the stock market actually went up 5%. And back to Joe's question, because he didn't come out and do all this crazy stuff. But also what is really troublesome for every American, whether you have an IRA or you're an investor, is the volatility. Look at what the stock market did in the course of these 100 days. And compare it to any of these other periods. This is another form of uncertainty, which is unbelievably destabilizing to business.
It's also destabilizing to consumers. And most American consumers now expect that the U.S. economy is headed towards a recession.
Consumers are terrified. The market itself actually is not quite as pessimistic about inflation, but consumers really are scared. 6.5%, up from under 3% just a couple months ago. The highest since 1981. And so you see that then reflected in something you guys have been talking about, but we'll lay it out here, which are the polls. 39% approval rating for Trump, lowest going all the way back to somewhere before Nixon, maybe LBJ at the height of the Vietnam War, who knows, but for a very, very long time, lower than where Trump was last time at this point, at first 100 days, and actually lower than where Joe Biden was after his first 100 days.
The destabilization, uncertainty, and sudden red light, green light policymaking approach from Trump is already showing up in the U.S. gross domestic product. In the first quarter, the GDP shrank slightly by 0.3%. Analysts had expected a 0.3% growth. Trump blamed the bad news on President Biden, even though in the last quarter of Biden's presidency, the GDP grew by 2.4%. The GDP surprise now, on top of everything else, caused another stock market plunge.
Well, he tried yesterday to blame the stock market on Biden, and I think there was a lot of laughter on around Wall Street, I think, on that one. I think that people pretty squarely put this on the shoulders of President Trump. You're right, though. Economists are calling this what is known as a supply shock. You can go back to perhaps the 70s with the oil price shocks. That was a supply shock, and the pandemic as well. You know, what's interesting about this, and I'm sorry, but a little bit worrisome in this score here, is that most recessions end up being ones of demand. People can't afford things because they lose their job. This supply shock is not easily handled through the normal tools that we handle downturns in, which is that you end up trying to get people to buy more. But if the problem is that there's not enough stuff and people are losing their jobs because of that, goosing demand is not going to help. And there's a second element to this that is more worrisome to me, which is that the normal circuit breaker on this tends to be government spending. And what's happening with government spending, that's coming down at the same time you have the supply shock. So we could be in for a twofer here over time.
A twofer as in a double-dip recession. That's what some analysts and investors are now expecting thanks to Donald Trump. At the moment, signs of economic calamity and collapse are already here, including empty cargo ships, the beginning of barren store shelves, and plunging consumer confidence. And by the way, consumer sentiment or consumer confidence accounts for about 70% of all U.S. economic activity. When consumers are feeling good, they spend more and pump more money into the U.S. economy, increasing economic activity and growth. When consumers are feeling down, they pull back on spending and the economy stalls. Business leaders and CEOs who were strong Donald Trump supporters heading into this administration see everything getting worse, not better.
Looking ahead, it's all bad. There's nothing but gloom out there in the business and the investor community.
It's all bad and there's nothing but gloom. And that's from business leaders who have to pay close attention to all of this and who believe that Donald Trump would be more moderate and thoughtful. Oops. But even the business leaders are now convinced that Donald Trump is crashing our economy and plunging America into a recession. The empty ports and barren store shelves are just the beginning. The U.S. economy under Donald Trump is unraveling. By the way, there's some new reporting about the brief nature of Donald Trump's recent meetings in Rome.
Peace summit of sorts for President Trump and Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky. The two leaders face-to-face, seated inches apart inside St. Peter's Basilica for a 15-minute one-on-one about Ukraine's war with Russia.
As the New York Times reports, it was a startlingly fast turnaround for the first overseas trip of a new president and left no time for discussions of his tariffs on the European Union, his turn towards normalizing relations with Russia, or his insistence that Europeans must take far larger responsibility for their own defense. Mr. Trump told aides he wanted to make it back to his golf resort in New Jersey before the end of the day. That's right, Trump was more interested in racing back to New Jersey to play golf than in talking at length about the Russia-Ukraine negotiations or in discussing them with other leaders or even chatting about the global economic turmoil. Trump wanted to play golf. This video generated a lot of comments on YouTube. Check it out below. One of the most popular comments is from FR57, who wrote, "He is a humiliating embarrassment for the United States." I hear you. I look forward to reading your comments about U.S. ports emptying and store shelves becoming barren thanks to Trump.
Somebody said, oh, the shelves are going to be open. Well, maybe the children will have $2 instead of $30, you know? And maybe the $2 will cost a couple of bucks more than they would normally. But we're not talking about something that we have to go out of our way.
I'm David Shuster. Thanks for joining us.